Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. I almost forgot to name my own show, so I never did that before. And I want to introduce Dr. Joseph Rosado. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Len. It was shocking how this came about. You want to share the story of how we got
Yeah.
reconnected?
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So, I decided with one of my marketing team members to uh, investigate, check out, do a beta test on this Podmatch um, thing platform. And so he was in charge of getting me gigs and podcasts and whatnot. And so there was one in particular that he sent to me and said, "Oh, you before you get on the show, you got to do like a 15-minute pre-show conversation." I'm like, "Sure, no problem." And so I'm running errands, running around Central Florida, and I call the number, and the name sounded familiar, but I'm a Mason. I'm a Scottish Rite Mason and a Master Mason, and the worshipful master at one of the lodges, his name is Len. So I didn't think that it was that uncommon or that common a name, or uncommon a name because I know a few Lens. So I didn't put two and two together. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. So we start talking, we connect at the time that we're supposed to connect. I'm running around, I get in my car and I introduce myself. Len introduces himself, and then Len asks, "Well, where are you located in Florida?" And I said, "Well, I'm in, Northeast Central Florida." And he's like, "Oh, I've got a partner down there by the name of Dr. Michelle Weiner." I'm like, "Wait a minute, I know Michelle Weiner." And he's like, "Yeah, there's a business that we're doing." And the more he spoke, I'm like, "Dude, I know you." and then I'm like, "This is Joe." And
Yeah.
and then we went through how, reconnected the
Yeah.
pieces, the missing pieces, and like, "Oh, yeah." And so like 3 minutes was tying loose ends, and all of a sudden it's like, "Wait a minute, I
Yeah.
know this guy." And so,
Well,
and
yeah.
thanks to you and your technology, and yeah, and I'll say it right here in front of you. I've said it behind your back. I'm going to say it to your face. Thanks to your technology, not only have my patients benefited from the technology to be able to hone in on what treatments work best for them using the medical cannabis, because I do that technology for conventional medications. I have I was the medical director for a behavioral mental health clinic. And when patients are 21, 22, 23, and they've been on medication since they were 12, and they're still having issues, I'm like, "Look, something's not right here." Or they're in their 40s or 50s, but particularly the younger adults that have been on medications since, middle school, elementary, middle, and sometimes high school. I immediately order the genetics testing. So thanks to your technology, not only has it helped my patients, but it also helped me. I was the first client.
Yeah.
I did it on myself first because that's always been my motto. Prior to being a medical doctor, as you know, I was a chiropractor. And a week didn't go by that somebody brought me the next latest, greatest MLM, multi-level marketing supplement. And
Right.
you got to put all your patients on this. And I'm like, "Well, give me a free sample. I'll try it. And if it works on me, then I'll consider it for my patients. If it doesn't work on me, then rest assured nobody's getting it."
Yeah.
And so I did the same thing, and I saw how amazing the results were. It confirmed what I knew anecdotally. I knew that high THC products took a while for me to metabolize, and I also knew that they stayed in my system for an extremely long time in comparison to other people that I spoke to, including patients. But I also knew that I did really well with ratio-based products, and lo and behold, it confirmed, and it turns out that you and I have the same genetics.
Yeah. Maybe we're related. So we should check that out.
There were Jews and there are Jews in Spain.
That's true. Yeah. When I did my DNA test, I'm 98% Ashkenazi Jewish, 1% Swedish, and 1% Neanderthal. So that's what I got. I have no idea.
Yeah, my top three are Iberian, which is Spain,
Yeah, yeah,
Portuguese, and indigenous Caribbean, so Taino.
yeah. You know the moment when you realize that your high hit you way harder than you expected. Your heart's racing, your head's spinning, and you wish that you could hit an emergency stop button. Guess what? There's an emergency stop button that's available now, or at least a pause. It's called Antidose. Antidose is a fast-acting THC-free formula and designed to minimize the unwanted effects of high-potency THC, seeking you back to being yourself and fast. Whether you're stuck on a couch or spinning in your head, Antidose helps you to reset, restore, and rebalance. Find out more at antidose.com. That makes sense. I think my dad has blonde hair and blue eyes. My grandmother had that, so maybe that's where the Swedish comes in. Who knows? Uh, Joe, I wanted to ask you this path to medicine. So, first of all, let's go through your origin story. Where did you grow up?
I was born in New York City, raised in the Bronx. I was there until about 15. And then right before my dad passed away, my dad died in October of 73. In the summer of 73, we came to Florida for vacation. And he was already looking for a place for us to live because my dad was always ahead of the curve. He was a true Renaissance man. And so he would see when neighborhoods were starting to shift, where things were not going right. And we always moved before the neighborhood got too bad. And so I recall as a child, we moved three times, three different locations, while in the Bronx. Then from there, we came down on vacation. He saw this house, purchased this house. And so it was here. He died a few months later. We put the house up for rent. And then in 77, the people that were, the tenants moved. And so my mom's like, things are really bad in New York. Let's go. Because we lived through the Son of Sam. That was the summer of 77.
Yeah.
So we dealt with the Son of Sam, which was not too far from where we lived. And then we had the massive blackout in August or July of 77. And so my mom's like, that's it. We're out of here. And so we moved from New York to Central Florida. And once I got here, I knew early on that I wanted to be a physician. And so as a result of that, I've was always gravitating towards things that were health oriented.
Well, let me
And
ask you a question. I don't mean to
yeah,
interrupt. Do you have any siblings?
I'm an only child.
Yeah, me too. So growing up, you said you were drawn to medicine, but were you sort of a kid that was into sports, math, science? How did you find out that you were drawn to medicine?
The What happened was I developed PTSD at a very young age. Back in the day, I was born in 62. So back in the day, the OB that delivered you gave you your first 2 years worth of shots. And I developed because I've always been and now I know what it is, but I'm a visual learner.
Yeah.
And so as we were going from our house, our apartment to the doctor's office, I recognized the blocks in the neighborhood. And so the minute my mom hit a specific corner I would immediately latch onto her neck and start screaming because I knew I was going to go get a shot. And so that created that level of PTSD. It got to the point that I was just so disruptive in the office that the OB told my mom, "You can no longer bring your son here because he's just too disruptive in the office. You got to find somebody else." And so my mom's like, "Well, who do you recommend?" So he gave her the name of a pediatrician that they used to work together at the same hospital. And in conversation, my mom mentioned it to a friend of ours, and my that individual said, "Oh, he's my second cousin. He's an amazing doctor. You're gonna love him." So when we went to his office, I went with my mom and dad. I was maybe two and a half, three, four, somewhere in there. I do recall the scenario though quite vividly. And so we get there, and doctor's offices in the city were in apartments. And so we go into this person's apartment, and so living room, nothing abnormal, everything's cool. He did not have a lab coat on. He came, received us at the door. He went to the back, finished what he was doing, then came, got us in the living room area. We walked through the apartment, and nothing stood out. Everything's good. Walked by an office, books, magazines, whatever. But once we got to the final room, that was his exam room. Once I walked in the exam room and I see the exam table and I see the table with all the equipment and I see the refrigerator and the scale, now I'm starting to panic a little bit. Not bad, but I'm starting to feel a little freaked. And so they sit me on the exam table, and the procedure was almost getting ready to be the same thing. I'm getting antsy. My mom and dad come on either side of me to hold me down. He says something really brilliant. He said, "Don't hold him down. Leave him alone." I'm like, I've got an ally here. Like,
Yeah.
as a 62-year-old man, I'm using terminology, but I'm like, wait a minute, this guy is different. And so he had in his hand the otoscope and a tongue depressor. And he handed them to me and said, "Here, examine me." And
Mhm.
I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Here, examine me." So now my parents chime in. It's like, "Yeah, go ahead and examine the doctor." He gave me the tools, and the minute they were in my hands, it was like something clicked. I'm like, this is familiar. This feels comfortable. And so he squatted down, which is a technique that I use whenever I see pediatric patients. I always squat down to their level. Like I'm never talking over them. I come down and I squat and I'm talking to them eye to eye. Same thing he did to me, I do. And and so I did what I thought was correct.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Okay, you examine me. Can I examine you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And at that instant, I said to myself, "This is what I want to be. This is what I want to do."
Amazing. Yeah, it's interesting because so I have this thing with you mentioned PTSD, maybe, but it's related to giving blood. So every single time that I have to get a blood test, and there was one time that I passed out. So now every single time that I go in, I have that. I mean, so much anxiety, so much stuff. And it's not even the needle because I'm all tattooed. It's not even that. It's this whole notion of, so I never thought about it as a PTSD thing. I wonder, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud as we're talking. I wonder if there's a power thing that has something to do with power. So when you felt that there was a violation and it was painful and you couldn't do anything about it, but when the doctor handed his tools to you, it gave you back your power. So now you're saying, "Oh, well, I'm empowered. It's not that bad." Maybe there's a part of that that goes into it as well. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense, but because I did not feel imprisoned. And that's how I felt at the other, because at the other place, it was always a screaming and yelling match and hold him down and he's moving, stop moving. So I would get yelled at, but then the nurses were getting yelled at because they weren't doing a good enough job holding me down.
Yeah, it was a lot of chaos too, and it was fear and all these other things that come out. So fast forward, your focus is medicine. You're going into medicine. Uh, when did you decide, like, I want to, this is the type of medicine that I want to do. You mentioned it like chiropractor. How did you make that decision of what it is that you want to do in medicine?
Well, at 15, I took a course in high school to become a certified nurse's aide. And at 16, I became a certified nurse's aide. I became an orderly. And so I was going to private school. And so um, my junior and senior years were paid for by working it was a work study program. And so I got involved there, but while there, I ingratiated myself with the radiologist because I was transporting patients from their rooms to the X-ray department and vice versa. And so I was in the rooms while the radiologists were reading and interpreting X-rays. So I'm learning anatomy as these guys are dictating. And so I'm loving the knowledge. It's just, I'm soaking it in. And then after that, I became an EMT, an emergency medical technician, then a paramedic. Then I worked as a cath lab technician. Um, and then at that time, I was pre-med, working as a cath lab technician, paramedic, and I was still am, but at that time, I was competing in martial arts, and I was stopped, getting ready to make a left-hand turn to pick up my uniform at the laundromat because I had a tournament that weekend, and I get rear-ended. I'm in a Datsun B210, and the guy that hit me was in a Delta 88. I lost.
It's funny, man. That's the car my dad used to have, a Delta 88. It's funny.
Oh, they were massive. And it was a 16-year-old kid that was driving his dad's car,
Yeah.
dropped his milkshake, bent over to pick it up, and when he came up, my vehicle was right there. And so instantly I felt something weird from the waist down. And I had immediate loss of sensation and like partial paralysis to where I could not move very well, just very uncoordinated. And so when the paramedics came on the scene, I'm a bit of a jokester. And so the guy that shows up, I'm like, "Hey, Schmitty, I don't feel my legs." He's like, "Yeah, right, Joe." I'm like, "No, really, Schmitty, I'm not joking." And his last name was Schmidt, but we called him Schmitty. And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." And I'm like, "No, for real." And so he grabbed an 18 gauge needle, stuck it in my calf, and I looked at him and I said, "I told you I don't feel anything." And his white face became like transparent. He just freaked out. And good old Irish boy, I mean German boy, Schmidt,
Yeah.
and he freaked. And he's like, "Don't move." I'm like, "I wasn't planning on it." I wasn't planning on it. And so they took me in, massive doses of steroids, traction, distraction. And what I did was I suffered spinal shock. I had such massive inflammation and at my spinal cord injury that's what happened. Within 24 hours, however, I started regaining feeling, movement, and the orthopod's like, "Oh, well, our job is done. Bye." Um, but I wasn't feeling right. And so I had suffered a sports injury before and had gone to a chiropractor. So I went back to the same chiropractor and he retook the x-rays, this time standing rather than laying. And he comes into the room. It's like, "Did you know you have a compression fracture?" I'm like, "Where?" He's like, "In your spine." I'm like, "No." He's like, "They didn't tell you in the hospital?" I'm like, "No, nobody told me anything." Brings me back and shows me the x-rays. Sure enough, my 12th thoracic was compressed. And so as a result of his knowledge, his skills, and how well I felt within 2 weeks of starting care with him, I decided not to go to medical school at that time and opted to go to chiropractic school. So it was a life-changing experience that caused me to go to chiropractic school. I practiced for 5 years, went to Ohio, worked there for about a year and a half, 2 years, hated the winters, and moved to Arizona, where I wanted a predominantly Hispanic practice in
Where you hated
Ohio.
the summers, by the way. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
love the summers. I would rather be hot than cold any
Me
day.
too. Me too.
No, and I loved it there. It was just great. But where I was in Ohio was Amish country, Wayne County,
Yeah.
and we had a phenomenal practice. And he was an extremely smart businessman. He'd been there 24 years. He had a hitching post in the back with oats and water, and so catering, obviously showing that he catered to the Amish, and so the people would come up in their horse and buggies, and they would feed their horses and whatever. But in the wintertime, we would rent school buses and we'd have drivers go to different communities, load up all the Amish families onto the school buses, and then bring them out to our office and we'd take care of them there, or we would drive down and take care of them in one of the churches or a barn.
Right.
So it was cool. I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. I just didn't like the cold weather. And so I moved to Arizona. That's where my twins were born. And that's where I had another life changing experience where I was a chiropractor taking care of Hispanic, underserved, underrepresented individuals that had been involved in automobile accidents. And one Sunday morning, I get a page on my beeper. Yes, beeper, no phones,
I remember.
no cell phones, and they didn't have my home phone number.
Right.
Um, a dad calling me up to tell me that his daughter had a high fever and they were afraid that she was going to have febrile seizures because she had a history of that. And I'm like, well, why are you calling me? I'm your chiropractor. Said, well, you're the only doctor we have. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not a medical doctor. I can't help you. And I said, I can tell you as a friend what I would tell somebody when I was a paramedic. I said, we're friends, but as a chiropractor, I can't even tell you taking Tylenol.
Yeah.
I can't do that. So, um, but that experience, seeing this little girl, because she did eventually seize, I did eventually get, to where she was, and saw the full on status epilepticus and just intractable seizures. Now, looking back, I'm pretty sure that she had one of the conditions that I manage with medical cannabis, either Lennox-Gastaut or Dravet's, because she would have seizures not only with fevers but other times, and she would not stop. It would just be all the time. And so that was when I made the decision that I would never be in a place where I could not help somebody and not be limited in my knowledge or my skills. And that the following day, Monday, I went to the Yellow Pages, not Google, because Google did not exist, and looked up test prep, contacted Kaplan and Princeton Review, did the MCAT reviews, and the rest literally is history.
I'm curious, when you went back to medical school, did they mention the endocannabinoid system? Did they even talk about it?
Great question. And yes, they did. I'll tell you where. It was in a pharmacology class. It was in pharmacology one,
Mhm.
because we had to take two pharmacology courses. And so it was pharmacology one, and we were in the toxicology section of pharmacology. And in the toxicology section, of course, we're going to start with the gateway drug. We started with cannabis.
Of course.
And there was a paragraph, three sentences, where it talked about the endocannabinoid system and it talked about the receptors.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking late 90s, it wasn't 2000 yet, so it was like 99-ish.
Yeah.
1996, it had just become medically legal in California. The first endocannabinoid was discovered and named in 1992. So we're talking about, 7 years from the naming and 3 years from it becoming legal in the state of Florida. And I'm sorry, state of
California.
California. And so I did learn that briefly, one of 10%, 10% of the medical schools in the US and possibly the world. And so, but that evening I went home because they talked about the endocannabinoid system, they talked about the cannabinoid receptors briefly, but then of course they went into the traditional jargon of, it's a gateway drug, it's going to lead you to all these other drugs. And so the lecture continued. I went home, pulled out the Goodman and Gilman, which was the, pharmacology Bible, looked up cannabis sativa, read up on it, and discovered what they wrote that read as follows: that it does not cause a physiological dependence, but a psychological one. And
Man.
I thought, okay, that makes sense. And so, but I thought, okay, just another tool in my toolbox. I'll put it in, put him in the back burner and just disregard it because I couldn't use it anyway. And then we progressed on to 2010 when it became medically legal in Arizona. And one of my best friends reached out to me to be his medical director because, like Florida, the licenses, they have to have a medical director. And so he approached me to be his medical director. His son, my daughters were 14 at the time. Though my buddy's wife did not feel comfortable us embarking in a cannabis project with our children being 14 because she felt that, oh, well, we tell the kids don't do drugs. And I'm like, yeah, but this isn't Joe and Don selling weed in the corner. This is Dr. Dearth and Dr. Rosado. But we scratched it. And then fast forward 4 years later, when John Morgan started the campaign here in Florida for Amendment 2, I sent him an email. I'm a physician, I'm an advocate. How do I get involved? 24 hours later, I'm with the campaign manager. And a week later, I'm on the Bureau of Speakers. And that literally opened up what I've been doing since 2016, which is recommending medical cannabis.
Joe, when you were first, was it internal medicine that you practiced? What was your primary practice? Like
General medicine,
general
yeah,
medicine.
womb to the tomb general medicine.
Okay.
I did, urgent care. I did pediatrics. I've done bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for men and
Okay.
women. Um, Clinical trials, clinical research, um, community mental health. I was the clinic director for Community Mental Health Center. I worked for Department of Health. I was the communicable disease director, oversaw the epidemiology department, immunizations. So I dabbled in different areas in medicine because I was a general practitioner. So I was
Sure.
able to, you
GP.
know what they say, jack of all trades, master of none. But because I've done so many seminars, self-help seminars and self-improvement, and one of the main ones is Tony Robbins, where he always talks about kanai, constant and never-ending improvement. And so, and talks about immersion, because I've done his seminars where there are no breaks. It's like you
I've
are
I've done them
immersed.
all. I've done them all. So I walked on fire. I did even business mastery. I was a coach for Anthony Robbins Institute for a minute. So you're speaking my language. I love Tony Robbins.
So, so in Date with Destiny, as you know, that's the one that where you're completely immersed to
Immersed.
truly create and change your life.
Yeah.
So that same concept I have applied pretty much to everything in my life. And it was at a Date with Destiny seminar that I was a chiropractor then, and he did an exercise, and he's like, go back to when you were 3, 4 years old. What did you want to be? Go back to when you were this age. What did you want to be? On and on. And I kept saying the same thing, doctor, doctor, doctor. And when we came, to and we were sharing with our partners, the my partner looked at me and said, so are you a doctor? I'm like, yeah, I'm a chiropractor. And they're like, but that's not the kind of doctor you wanted to be. I'm like, well, but I'm a doctor. And it's like, but that's not the one you wanted to be. And it kind of like put it in there a little bit, but not really. And then, well, bam, 2 years later, I had the experience with a little girl in Arizona, and that was it. But yeah, so I've done different things in medicine. Um, but now, of since, like I said, since 2016 to present, I've dealt primarily with the medical cannabis side of things, but with a specific focus. Pediatrics, obviously, because there's 2,500 certifying physicians in the state of Florida. There are 55,000 licensed physicians in the state, but less than 10 see children. And because I was the first in the state of Florida to recommend cannabis to a 15-year-old who was terminally ill, that made news all over the state. Parents started bringing their kids to me, and so by by default, I became a pediatric medical cannabis doctor, but also working with mental health, behavioral health, anxiety, depression, treatment-resistant depression,
Yeah.
PTSD, obviously one of the qualifying conditions in the state of Florida. And now, well, not now, for the past 4 years, I've added to the cannabis ketamine, waiting for the United States to come around and decriminalize magic mushrooms, psilocybin, going that route, and then MDMA as well.
Yeah. So there's a gap that I'm trying to bridge. You're in Arizona and you're a GP, general practitioner, and you're working all these different things that you mentioned, and then your associate says, "Let's do something with cannabis." But were you did you like study more about the endocannabinoids? Like, how did you start thinking about incorporating just cannabis into your medical practice?
That happened in 2014 because in 2010, because nothing really happened
Right.
with that project, it kind of fell by the wayside. We never got far enough for me to engage in any additional learning or, immersion in
What
learning.
was it? But was it just like it came and said, there's a business opportunity. You didn't think about it as a medical practitioner at the time that you can use this as a tool, or were you already considering that?
No, I was considering that because I had remembered when he called me in 2010, I went back to, 1999 when I was in pharmacology class and that evening studying
Yeah.
and learning about the endocannabinoid system and cannabis not being, you know, psychologically, not being physiologically dependent.
Right.
So I was already leaning towards that direction anyway. And having been a chiropractor beforehand, I was more open to the whole idea of holistic medicine in general. So that it wasn't far to me.
Right.
But because it didn't pan out in 2010, in 2014, when I reached out to John Morgan, that's when I really got like, up to here, reading and learning, and that's when I just bombarded every learning area, everything I could research, and that's when I got really involved with reading Meshulam's work and Lemire Hanoush, who later, in 2019 we met at an event, 2018 rather, in November of 2018 we met in Colombia at an event that he needed someone to translate for him. I volunteered. They told me, no, you don't want to translate. You're a doctor. I'm like, yeah, but I'm bilingual, bicultural, and I'm a physician. This gentleman's accent is very strong, and he's going to be talking medicine. The translator that you're going to bring is not going to do any good. And he turns around and says, "Thank you." And the minute I saw his face and heard the voice and saw the face, I'm like, "Oh, it's you." And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, "I'm not worthy." So
He's
we
great. Yeah. Lemire
started,
was great. Yeah. We hung out for a while.
and so
Brilliant guy.
he was the beta reader. He was the first one to read the book.
Yeah.
And and then later, after he read it, he's like, "This is a really good book. I'm very proud of what you've done." And he thanked me for having referenced him and of course Rafi and whatnot. And then my uh, publisher was the one that said, "Why don't you ask him to write your forward?" I'm like, "Why would he?" He's like, "Well, why wouldn't he? Ask him." So I did, and it happened. But yeah, so in 2014, when I got involved as one of the speakers, that forced me to really learn and really understand because I'm advocating for medical cannabis, and I wasn't going to be on stage with sheriffs who were totally against it, or politicians or government officials, and come or other physicians and not come across like I knew what the hell I was talking about. So that's when went into that whole immersion thing with the cannabis. And so I read everything, Ethan Rousseau's work, Dustin Sulak's work, um, Margaret Getty, Sue Sisley, all the greats, all the ones that came before me, that I stand on their shoulders, and then the ones that have come after me are standing on my shoulders. And that's what I like about the cannabis industry, that we are always working with each other, and we're always learning from each other. And yeah, we have our own personalities, we have our own quirks, but we're all still wanting to be of service. I mean, you work with Bonnie Goldstein
We'll
in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a lot of work with pediatrics. So I anything that she publishes, anything that she writes, anything that she says that's kids pediatric related, I don't see kids all the time. I see them more than most, but I don't see them all the time. So I need to stay sharp. I need to stay on top of it. And so why not learn from people like her, you know?
Did you receive any sort of pushback from the traditional medical community? That's quackery. He's introducing, drugs, illegal, illicit substances, all that stuff. What were your peers saying to you when you made this sort of decision?
Did you forget I was a chiropractor? The
I,
word quack was,
I didn't want to bring it up, but yeah.
I mean, the word quack from my family, oh, a quackerpractor. Oh, you couldn't get into real medical school? You couldn't get into. So, yeah, I got it all. So,
Uh,
that kind of created a thick skin. I mean, coming from the Bronx, you already have a thick skin. And then going through life as I mean, I was an orderly, a guy, being a nurse's aide. What? You couldn't get a ranch job? I mean,
Uh, yeah, I get it, but still, there's a part of it where you know there's a definitive line. I kind of went through this in a way myself because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but I do have some knowledge. And when I was asked to, I was in Colombia, like I was in different talks, and I sat there with everybody who had initials in the front or back of their names, and not me. So I was trying to get this level of maybe respect from who I thought were my peers, but they didn't see me that way because I wasn't, up to what they perceived would be that equal knowledge and, go to medical school and all that stuff. But at some point, there was a tipping point, right? So that knowledge that I had in genetics and all these other things, it gained that level of, and everybody's like, we're now sitting at I remember there was a conference where I was asked to speak, and there was four of us and a moderator, and we met beforehand. There was an MD PhD, and he was just like he was kind of brushing me off, and then I think somebody asked a question, and I answered, and I went kind of in depth, and then he approached me afterwards and like apologized and said, "Hey, I was saying something to you and it wasn't right." And we were in a panel, and it sort of was a tipping point where I started to get that. But not that I needed the respect of my peers. I wasn't like looking for it. It wasn't a need, but it was nice to receive. But when you're sort of on the fringes, and you mentioned chiropractic, when you're on the fringes, the rest of the community starts looking at you and maybe starting to poke holes in what you're trying to. So I'm just curious how you dealt with that and continue to overcome that, because there's all these type of obstacles in your way. People would call, this guy's a druggie, he's a stoner, he's this and that. And years later, they would come to me and say, my mom is sick, or my cousin, or something like that. It sort of went 180. So I was just wondering about your personal experience when it came to that.
yeah, initially, I went to, when it first started, we still had no laws in the state, but it was common knowledge that I was pushing and promoting and advocating for medical cannabis. And I went to a few um, conferences, lunch and learns or dinner conferences that Big Pharma puts out. And so I'm there eating my meal, and invariably, it's a cultural thing. African American doctors gravitate to other African American doctors, Hispanic doctors gravitate to Hispanic doctors, and we're sitting in the corner and we're doing our thing, we're talking our language, Spanglish more than anything, half English, half Spanish, but we're all there. And one of the guys is a hematologist oncologist, that was there, and had just hired a new associate who was from Peru, and still fresh out of University of Miami, had just completed his fellowship. And he's like, and he and I had already met, so we kind of had an affinity. we were younger than the other guys and whatever. And so we're sitting here in the corner and we're talking, and he's like, "Hey, is it true that you're promoting you're advocating for medical cannabis?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, I've read some really amazing studies that show the benefits, for patients with cancer and, the managing of nausea, whatever." He's like, "I've written prescriptions for Marinol. But coming from Peru, my mom, my grandparents made teas, whatever, and so we're over here exploring ideas and just talking, not advocate, not doing, just getting to know each other and sharing stories." And there's this freaking family practice doctor that's between his boss and us, who's from the Dominican Republic, which is where I went to medical school. And he looked at me and he goes, "All you want to do is make money." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, don't you?"
Yeah, who doesn't?
It's like, this is our livelihood. How else am I going to make money other than seeing patients? Like, really? Like, you're stupid. It's like, well, no, you're just in it for the money. So then are you saying that an interventional cardiologist wants more money than a non-interventional cardiologist because they do caths and the other ones don't? I'm like, you're an idiot. This is something that I see that is a benefit. I'm not hanging up anything. I'm not starting anything, doing anything that nobody's not going to want. I'm like, this is an alternative. It's just an alternative. And it started there. And so I did see the lines kind of being drawn, but I really didn't care because by this time I was like in my 40s, late 40s, early 50s. I really didn't give a shit. So it didn't matter. But these same individuals, however, as you just stated, once they started seeing their patients coming off of their antidepressants, coming off their anti-anxieties, coming off of the opiates, and utilizing other sources for their pain, to manage their sleep, no more controlled substances. Now they're coming in and going, "What is it that you're doing?" And the first was a psychiatrist who, this the first paper that I published on the topic was about a 45-year-old female that was taking 42 to 58 pills per day. And within 3 months, she was down to 3 pills a day. And when she went to see her psychiatrist, he called me up, and his exact words were, "What in the fuck are you doing?" And I thought, oh man, this guy's going to have a field day with me, because you know how psychiatrists can be. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I just saw so and so, and she looks amazing. And she says that she attributes it all to you." I'm like, "Well, not to me. It's the plant." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "It's medical cannabis. I recommend medical cannabis for her." He's like, "You do?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You mind if I shadow you?" I'm like, "No, not at all. Come on over, hang out." And he came over, spent the day with me, and he asked some really, really good questions. And we had some really good conversations. And we mix and match things, and we talked about it, and he saw what I was doing and how I was weaning people off of stuff, and he was my biggest source of referrals.
Wow. I, you know, so Florida had a vote for, I even can't stand saying recreational cannabis because
Adult use.
adult use. Yeah, I don't even understand that. How can something be recreational as medicine? But it didn't pass. So I wanted you, which I actually, well, I have my own opinion about. I think people should receive, if you're old enough, you should get whatever you want to get. But there is, it is medicine. So, certain amounts of THC and certain things can have some certain adverse effects and all that stuff. It should be, I always believe it should be under supervision of a healthcare professional. In an ideal world, we sort of have this next 4 years of new administration. They say a lot of different things. Every administration has been saying a lot of things with almost zero action that has been taken, except for like the hemp act, maybe. What? It's a two-part question. What do you think will happen, and then what do you feel ideally should happen with cannabis in terms of getting it legalized at a federal level?
The first question, at a state, are you referring to state or federal?
I'm referring to federal.
Federal. Okay. So, because in the state of Florida, it's the governor oscillates one side, the other side depends. And I mean, thanks to him, and with the bad I say the good. Thanks to him, we have flour,
Yeah.
because prior to him, Rick Scott did not allow for flour at all in the state. But then Ron DeSantis did free the plant. Granted, John Morgan had sued the state of Florida, and so it's like,
You had to
okay,
do it.
we'll we'll free the flower if you take away the lawsuit you have against us. And John's like, say less. So, um, my concern is the fact that we have, and there exists, the federal patent for the use of medical cannabis for chronically debilitating conditions. We have a synthetic form of cannabis in the United States. Two medications, dronabinol, also known as Marinol, and Sesamet, also known as Nabiximol. So we have those two already in the United States, but they are synthetics. Patients don't like them. You don't get the entourage effect. You don't get terpenes. You don't have any CBD. You don't have any other phytocannabinoids. It's too strong. The patients really dislike it. So that's not legit. The next thing is we have Epidiolex in the United States that came in as a Schedule 5, which comes from CBD. It's a CBD isolate. It's just CBD, nothing else. Coming, from hemp, started at GW Pharmaceuticals in Europe, UK, and then made its way to the US. So we already have cannabis medicine in the United States. When I started seeing patients coming into the office asking for Epidiolex, requesting it, and the reps coming to the office and bringing us lunch and talking to us about Epidiolex. And then I saw what the ticket price was for 1 year's worth of Epidiolex, which is $32,000. And I saw a family of 3 children, all of which had the gene for Dravet, and every one of those children needed cannabis. And I'm looking at him going, that's $100,000 of medicine per year. There's something for a CBD isolate. I scratched my head and went, do I really think that cannabis should be federally legal? Because that is a true point of contention. I mean, I went to a local dispensary 2 months ago. In fact, this weekend, for that matter, Super Bowl weekend. Congratulations to your Philadelphia Eagles.
Thank you.
Um, but if you wore your team a football jersey, you got 50% off. Well, I went in, and prior to the discount, 5 pre-rolls were being sold for $8.70. 10 mini rolls were being sold for $12.50. With the 50% discount, do the math. Now, would that exist if it were federally legal and one of the large pharmaceutical companies took a hold of one of those? Would that be the reality? And the answer is absolutely not. And so that is my concern, that it does become federally legal, and then these unscrupulous individuals will charge you $32,000 for a year's worth of medicine.
So what would be your ideal situation as is now with no changes, or what would be some modifications? And is there any country in the world that you can look to and say, they're kind of doing it right. Maybe that's something we should investigate.
Uruguay.
Yeah.
That's
Because
where I'm going to
everything is
retire.
legal. Because everything
Huh?
is legal. Everything is legal in Uruguay.
Well, everything's legal in Portugal.
Yeah, it's decriminalized, right?
Yeah, everything in Portugal is decriminalized. But in what I like about Uruguay is that you get your cannabis at a pharmacy.
Exactly. So that's what I
So
want.
it's always medical. It's not a dispensary. You're getting it at a pharmacy.
Yeah,
It is medically legal. It is available and you can use it. Um, but it is dispensed in a pharmacy and it is available to the masses. And uh, it's not. There's no price gouging.
right. And it doesn't have a monopoly with like a big pharma behind it that you have to get our products,
Which is one of
Pfizer.
the reasons I voted no for the adult use
Yeah,
here in Florida.
yeah,
For two reasons, I voted no. One, because the way it was worded, it was so um, MMTC, Medical Marijuana Treatment Center heavy. It was
yeah,
MMTC forward. You can only get your medicine here. You can only get your medicine from us. So it was that separation. And the other was there was no inclusion of home grow.
yeah,
The majority of states that have a medical or an adult use program allow for a certain amount of plants to be grown. When I visited Colombia, every Colombian citizen is allowed to grow up to 19 plants. And I met individuals that everybody in their family had their 19 plants. It was grown beautifully in a nice, safe environment. They knew exactly how much they needed for them to function. They did some oil extractions. And then what I loved about this community was that they then went out to the mountains to where the underserved were, and they were giving it to them for in exchange for eggs, chickens, like they were feeding their own, taking care of their own, but at the same time, you people appreciate things more when they pay for them. But if they don't have the monetary means, they have something of value. And that exchange is what makes communities flourish. And I saw that working in Colombia. We were going to do a project just outside of Medellin in Yarumal, where there's a high incidence of people with Parkinson's disease. And a little thing called COVID squashed that project. But Professor Hanoush was involved with that. Some of the clinicians in Israel were going to be part of that. I was going to be part of that project. So it was like all these great minds and me showing up to freaking Colombia and working with this community that has no, I'm sorry, not Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's, yeah,
It was for Alzheimer's disease because they said they in Spanish they say la maldición de Yarumal, which is the damnation or the curse for Yarumal, and the name of the project was La bendición de Yarumal. They changed it, transformational vocabulary.
yeah,
They changed from the curse to Yarumal to the blessing
blessing, yeah.
for Yarumal, and the blessing was us bringing knowledge of cannabis and using cannabis for their Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I think it's a really good model, and I agree with you with the adult use. The only thing with federal legalization is so the way I kind of saw it, we had a model of prohibition before with alcohol. And what happened? We just abolished prohibition. We said we're going to have federal agencies for quality control. The states get to make their own determinations and create cross-state trade. So, I'm not comparing cannabis to alcohol in any way. I'm just talking about
Mhm.
the legal aspects of just prohibition in place. So there is a path to do that. The federal government already came out and said, we're not doing that. We believe this is a drug of some sort, it's medicine drug, and it should be scheduled as such. So if that's the case, if they ever do anything, how would they ever control the dispensary market that is being utilized now? Because I love the idea of a pharmacy, because at the very least, you have a compounding pharmacist, you have somebody that can dose correctly, you know what you're going to put in your body, it's going to be labeled right, there's consistency to that. And I think this is the biggest factor nationally, because I can't get the same exact product in California. I can call it, Alaskan Thunderfuck. It doesn't matter what it is, but I'm not going to get it the same thing in Florida as I am in California, or even batch to batch. So I'm just trying to come up, and there is no perfect solution or answer, but I just want to get your thoughts on on what can we do to be able to say, okay, ideally, this is what the ideal situation, at least in phases, would be. And we all the community throughout all the states who are in cannabis, we all support this. Can we actually get to something like that? What will be your opinion on that?
I mean, with the proper leadership, and I'm not only talking about the leadership at the White House, but with the proper leadership in and among our tribe, the
Yeah.
cannabis tribe. One of the observations I've made, and I've been verbal about my critique and criticism, in that many of the individuals in our tribe that support the use of cannabis and advocate for it are quick to utilize it in a non-serious way, i.e., social media, smoking a blunt. You know, I mean, I don't take my cholesterol medicine in public. Yeah, I don't take my ADD medication because I still take ADD medication because it is what it is. Do I use my green crack? Absolutely. Do I use the proper terpenes that help me focus? Absolutely. Is my dose lower now than it was before? Hell yeah. Do I still need that push? Of course, I've got, a gazillion projects going on at the same time, podcasts, interviews, patients, two daughters that are going to be 29 in a month and a half, four grandkids, going through a divorce. I have a lot of stuff going on at the same time in my mind, and it does help me focus better. But I'm not taking the same dose that I was taking, you know, when I first started using my ADD medicine, and I don't use an amphetamine based medicine either. I use a non-amphetamine based, but I combine and mix the two. But you don't see, I don't do a selfie or do a Facebook live and go, "Hey, I'm taking my Stratera, woo!" That's and that, because of that dynamic, mainstream medicine will always look at it as party drug,
Yeah.
you know, wanting to get high, etc.
Yeah, it's the culture. I completely agree with you. And I think there's room and there's nothing wrong with people going to a concert and filming
Oh
each other.
no.
But I do believe that there's parallel paths. There is the medical therapeutic aspect of the plant that should be prescribed, personalized to the individual, compounded, controlled through a pharmacy distribution system. And you want to grow cannabis and consume and, like you said, roll a blunt or whatever. I haven't been to a music studio where it wasn't like blunts over and over. That's not, that's also a therapeutic product that's helping with something, creativity, anti-anxiety, but it's not under medical supervision. Nothing wrong with that. We take supplements. I go to a store and get supplements or phytonutrients and all these other
Yeah.
things. I don't need a
We're
prescription for that.
self-medicating. We're
Exactly.
self-medicating. I mean, how many patients don't come to me that feel depressed that haven't started taking St. John's wort because somebody at a health food store said, "You know what? In Europe, they use this for mild to moderate depression.
Yeah,
Maybe you should try it." You
exactly.
know? Oh, here's some 5-HTP. Try that. See if that'll do anything for your serotonin levels. You know, and that's why when people ask me, you know, uh, what the difference between adult use is versus medical, like the only difference is with medical, there's a physician involved making a recommendation. With adult use, however, how it works in our body, it's all medical because we all have an endocannabinoid system. The cannabis is all working on those receptors, and we are self-medicating because we know before a doctor told us, we knew that we suffered with anxiety or we suffered with depression or we suffered from PTSD, and we knew that when we use this, it made us feel this kind of way. And when patients come in that have severe anxiety or PTSD, and I tell them right off the top, you don't want to use sativa dominant strains or chemobars, and you want to focus on these specific terpenes. They look at me and go, "Oh yeah, sativas make me paranoid. I don't mess with them."
Yeah.
They already knew. They didn't need me, Joe Rosado, MD, MBA, DD, DC, to tell them. They knew that. It's
They
like
can also take an
Eddie Murphy was one
endo-DNA.
time.
They can take an endo-DNA test also.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy had the best line when he was being interviewed by the Screen Actors Guild,
Yeah.
who passed away. Uh, they asked him because he's discovered multiple comedians, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, etc. And he said, these guys were funny before I showed up and said they're funny. It's like they were already funny. I just showed up and said, "Hey, I can help you."
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what he's like. That's what I did. They were funny. I didn't make them funny. I didn't say they were funny. I just said, "You're funny. I can help you." And it's the same thing with when they come to me with cannabis. Yeah, you know how to use the product. Fantastic. You know what you've used works. Great. But let's talk about mixing and matching. Let's talk about not just vaping or inhaling or smoking. Let's talk about incorporating some sublingual oils. Let's talk about adding some edibles. Well, wait a minute. You had your gallbladder removed? Okay, well, edibles are probably not going to work for you. Let's talk then about topicals.
Yeah.
Let's talk about suppository so it'll bypass your liver. Now they're opening their ears and their mind and going, wait a minute, I never considered that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, now you're going to get more bang for your buck because now you're going to treat it like medicine. Just like I treated somebody with for pain management, give them a 3-day patch, give them an extended release opiate, give them a short acting opiate for breakthrough pain. I do the same thing with cannabis. We've
Yeah.
got a dispensary that provides a 3-day cannabis patch that they use for 3 days. We use edible or an RSO extended release, tincture, and then use the inhalation for breakthrough every 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah, it's so important to have medical oversight, with anything that we put in our body that alters it. It's your own neurochemistry that's actually making that alteration. But we don't have to get into the endocannabinoids and all that stuff.
We could go down a really
I
good
know, I
rabbit hole,
know.
buddy.
So I wanted to ask you. I ask all my guests some music questions, but with you, I'm also curious because you grew up in the Bronx in the era of the beginning of hip hop. My grandparents lived in the Bronx, so I used to spend summers there, and you could barely sleep because sirens all night going and all that stuff. But
We had the block parties.
exactly, yeah. But I was introduced to hip hop, and I'm a little bit younger than you. So I wanted to. My first question is, I do have hip hop history questions, but my first question is, do you remember the very first concert that you attended? So what was the first concert?
Hmm. I had this conversation a few weeks ago. My first rock concert was Styx.
Okay.
And it was cool because a few weeks ago, I went and saw them again.
That was my my next question was, what was the last concert that you saw? So you bookended your experience of concert with the same band. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I went. My first rock concert was I saw Styx in the late 70s, early 80s, I want to say. Um, and then like 2, 3 weeks ago in Clearwater, Florida, right on the beach. In fact, it was when we had that cold spell
Yeah.
in Florida where we had snow and everything. It was crazy cold. I'm out there in an amphitheater by the Gulf of America now, not the Gulf of Mexico, by the Gulf of America, uh, listening to Styx, and it was cool. It was
Yeah.
really cool. But last year I did some really cool stuff. Um, I've decided to see them before they die, type of thing.
Yeah.
And so last year, I in June I saw Lionel Richie and Earth, Wind and Fire here in Orlando together. Earth, Wind and Fire opened for Lionel Richie, and then I went to San Antonio and for opening weekend for the Spurs, and went to see Billy Joel and Sting.
Yeah.
And Sting opened for Billy Joel, but Billy Joel introduced Sting, which was crazy. It was the first night of the World Series where the Yankees were up, and then in the last inning, LA kicked their asses.
Yeah.
But so I saw those two guys live in San Antonio, and then you know, in the last year, beginning of this year, I went and saw Styx down in Florida, and so next this weekend I'm going to Augusta, Georgia, to listen to Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass.
Love it.
Now that is more of my affinity with my dad because I grew up listening to that music because that's what my dad listened to,
Yeah.
and so I'm going to go listen to Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass, but bucket list, you know, Paul McCartney. Definitely want to see him this coming year, and there I have some others, but right now that's like top in my on my bucket list.
Yeah. I saw all the ones you mentioned. Incredible. And Sting, I saw Sting at what's called the Beach Life Festival last year. Lenny Kravitz is headlining this year, but uh, Sting was just amazing. He was so good. So, all right, another music question. For next year, you can only listen to 5 albums. And I know this changes, and you don't have to remember the name of the album.
Uh-huh.
It could be a Sting or a Styx album. What will be those 5 albums?
Okay, Stevie Wonder, "Songs in the Key of Life." No,
It's right there. All right.
Stevie Wonder, "Songs in the Key of Life." Um, Thriller, Michael Jackson. Um, uh, I don't think Fania All Stars Greatest Hits. Fania All Stars is like the original salsa guys. So you had Willie Colon, you had Hector Lavoe, Ray Barreto, like all these old school true salsa players from the mid late 70s. That's what I was listening to when I was in the Bronx because I was going to block parties,
Yeah.
and that's where all the girls were. So
Oh, yeah.
and then one of my friend's sister taught me how to dance, and so I thought I was the crap, man. I thought I was the shit. And of course, it was right. It was dovetailing in with a little bit of disco.
Yeah.
Um, so hip hop came in a little bit
Yeah.
after, but something by the Fania All Stars, um, Renegade by well, not really Renegade. It was more Paradise Theater, Sticks, Paradise Theater by Sticks,
Okay.
and um shit. This next one, the last one is a toss up between the Beatles' White Album or uh the Earth, Wind and Fire. I forgot the name of the album, but it's Earth, Wind and Fire.
Got it. Okay. Cool list. Final question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
I was neat. I was a neat freak.
Yeah.
I was an only child, so I could not get away with it. But the I had two rooms that I remember as a child, while my dad was still alive. Um, and so on the wall over my bed was the guardian angel. with that picture of the guardian angel and two little children walking over like a creek, like a bridge over a creek. That was over my bed with the Sacred Heart and the cross. Devout Catholics, altar boy, the whole nine. So that was on the head of the headboard, just over the headboard. I had the big one of the guardian angel, and then the Sacred Heart, which was my dad's patron saint, what he wore, and then the cross. Twin size bed. My dad had upholstered my headboard, and so he had like a blue. It used to be black and white, but then he changed it to like this blue suede looking thing, because that's on blue suede shoes. So he did that, and then my bedspread was of a vehicle. It was a red car, red sports car convertible that I would make believe I was getting into and getting out of when I would go in. Um, with a dresser drawer. We had no closets because we're in the Bronx. So my dad bought this external closet, and that's where I would hang my clothes. And that was my room, the same design in both places that I lived in. Then when we moved down here, I was 15, 16 years old. I was a teenager. So I had a picture of Farrah Fawcett Majors on my wall. The famous one that had the oversized nipple.
Yeah, I remember I had
In
a
the red bathing suit.
yeah, I had a Heather Thomas poster, which was later on from
Yeah, it was
all
right
that.
after. Yeah,
Um, Joe, where can people engage with you, your practice, get your book, whatever you want to share?
absolutely. The easiest and fastest way to get a hold of me is on my website, josephrosadomd.com. josephrosadomd.com. On there are all the links to all my social media platforms. Um, On YouTube, I have a YouTube channel called The Dr. Rosado Show where I have videos in English and in Spanish. You can also search on YouTube and find interviews that I've done with Montel Williams, with Jordan, the Wolf of Wall Street, who interviewed me in 2019 in Beverly Hills. Um, Let me see. As far as my practice goes, I am in Central Florida. So I'm licensed in the state of Florida, but I'm also licensed in the state of Michigan and in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So I hold three medical licenses. In those three jurisdictions, I can practice medicine. I can tell you what to do, what not to do, what to take, what not to take. Any other jurisdiction, you can reach out to me. You can go to my website and schedule a free 15-minute appointment, with a specific question. And the way I can uh, get around, because I see and manage people from all over the world, is that I give you the disclaimer. I'm not a licensed physician where you are. What I'm going to give you is a recommendation, a suggestion based on my experience with the, over 9,000 office visits that I've had since August of 2016 to present. And so when I utilize that, this is what they've used, this is what's worked, this is how they've used it, but you're at your own discretion. That's my disclaimer. And so I can coach people, and in helping them understand and navigate through things a little bit better, I can direct them to people that I have met that I can direct them to. But for the most part, and the easiest is going to my website. My books are there as well. But you can also go to Amazon.com, type in Joseph Rosado, MD, and the medical cannabis, and there you will find all seven of my books.
And for my audience, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate everybody's wonderful feedback and reviews and comments and the good ones and not the great ones too. I always
You
learn.
learn from those.
Yeah, they're the best. I learn from those experiences. If they're really something, some people are just saying things, but if they're constructive, bring them. Thank you for buying my book, Making Cannabis Personal, which you can get on Amazon. And Joseph, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. And I want to thank you for being an advocate, for sticking with. it's not an easy thing to do, to be in the cannabis business, to be a medical professional in the cannabis space. So the more narrowing and working with children, the more narrowing we do, the more difficult it is. So I appreciate you being an advocate for plant medicine. Thank you.
No, it's an honor and a pleasure. And as I always end all interviews, I will end this one the same. Hashtag cannabis is medicine.
Oh yeah, and cannabis is personal. That's right. Thanks, Joe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment. I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.